Nothing is everything, but everything is something. This is what we need to keep in mind as the preseason goes along, because there's a lot of players rising and falling in drafts right now. But we're going to go through the rankings, adjust them to go through the top 30 wide receiver rankings for 2025. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel. Now, for those of you who are just now preparing for your drafts, you have no idea what I've been working on all offseason, and it is the greatest thing in the history of fantasy sports. This is not hyperbole. What I've been working on all offseason is a site on fsroundup.com, and the purpose of this site is so that you can hook up your leagues in ESPN and in Yahoo leagues, and not just fantasy football, by the way, fantasy basketball leagues, fantasy baseball leagues, fantasy hockey leagues. You can hook them up to our site, and we will automate the waiver wire process for you. So that means you don't have to wake yourself up at 3 in the morning just to claim a player and be all disheveled. You can sleep peacefully through the night, and we will automate the waiver wire process for you. I can't exaggerate when I say that this has never been brought to the fantasy space before. So unlike most fantasy creators who are just going to put only information behind a paywall, like their rankings, like draft guides, this is legitimate technology that's been developed for a long time, by the way, that's going behind this paywall that will actually help you win your league after the draft. It's way better than a draft guide, because the draft guide is just going to help you really quick in your draft. Well, what happens when players get injured, when players rise, when players fall? You need to know how to work the waiver wire during the season, and this makes it so much easier. I can't wait to unveil this to you guys. It will officially be available to you, my audience, in late August or early September. So in other words, just in time for the fantasy football season. So for right now, just go to fsroundup.com and get yourself familiarized with the site. It's about to change the game entirely, and it's going to bring you more value than you could ever imagine. Now, dropping down to our first tier right here, obviously it's still going to be Ja'Marr Chase and CeeDee Lamb. Ja'Marr Chase for the obvious reason, right? I always say, it's not that I believe that he's going to repeat as the number one wide receiver, but I think if anybody could do it, he can. And I think the last wide receiver to repeat in fantasy football year over year is Antonio Brown. So Ja'Marr Chase, kind of in that same talent realm as Antonio Brown. I think it's not impossible whatsoever, but the bottom line is he has the best upside and the best chance to do it. But if it's not him, I think it's CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, literally the only concern I have with CeeDee is this Dak and Brian Schottenheimer dynamic. Like, I really don't think Schottenheimer is going to be a good coach. I think it's actually going to be a disaster. But the beauty of this situation is that Dak is going to have to throw the ball a ton, because the run game is going to be lousy this year. They might have a good offensive line to help the run game, but the bottom line is that CeeDee Lamb is going to get so many targets. Pickens only opens things up for him because they can't double, triple team CeeDee like they used to. So CeeDee Lamb, in my opinion, is going to be elite in fantasy football this year. By the way, a great draft value as well. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 3 and Justin Jefferson at 4. So there's been ranking changes in this tier in particular because of Puka Nacua and Malik Neighbors, who we will discuss here in a little bit. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I leapt over Puka Nacua. I also leapfrogged JJ over Puka Nacua as well, but I still prefer Amon-Ra over Justin Jefferson. And the reason being is because I know his quarterback. And I know that Jared Goff is going to provide a lot of upside. I also know Amon-Ra St. Brown's elite. Not that Justin Jefferson's not. Do not take that as a slight at Justin Jefferson. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is just in a better offensive situation than Minnesota is. When I look at Minnesota, I've been harping on this all offseason. I don't believe in J.J. McCarthy. I just don't. And I can't get convinced that this offense run by Kevin O'Connell, a former quarterback, by the way, in the NFL, this offense that loves to throw the ball a ton with Kevin O'Connell, I cannot be convinced that a quarterback coming from a college that barely threw 20, 25 times a game is going to lead the charge with 30-plus passes per game on a regular basis. I think upside is lower for JJ because of that. I've got no legitimate problem with the injury right now because he's an elite player. He will bounce back and be there and be great. The problem I have is ceiling play with the quarterback, and I don't trust it with JJ McCarthy like I do with Jared Goff. And then at number 5, I've got Puka. I've got Puka at 5, and Nico Collins actually leapfrog Malik Neighbors as well. With Puka Nacua, this injury with Stafford is very concerning. First it was, well, we're just resting him. He's going to be okay. Then it was, well, he's struggling a little bit. Surgery's not an option, though. Then it was, well, he's going to come back to practice. And then this week he didn't practice at all. So this injury is not great. I mean, this is a quarterback who's older. He's been beaten and battered throughout his entire career. I just can't really get convinced that this is going to be a solid situation for an entire year. Therefore, if Stafford is not there, Puka's value and his upside plummets with Jimmy Garoppolo. So he needs Stafford out there. But Puka, if Stafford's there, is elite option. Like he is originally has been my number 3 wide receiver all offseason long, but you cannot debate this. Matt Stafford being out is legitimately concerning. Nico Collins over Malik Neighbors at this point is all about injury. And listen, the irony of this one is that Nico Collins is not a guy that I view as like particularly likely to finish an entire season. Like, I just don't really picture him doing that. He never has. But Malik Neighbors and Nico Collins, realistically, I think their upside is very similar. And that's the reason in drafts now, I'm going to take Nico over Malik. Malik Neighbors, this toe injury is becoming a real problem. Like, this is not, some new injury. It's been lingering back to college. I mean, this is an injury he's dealt with since college, which on one hand makes me think he'll be fine. He'll just continue to play through it. But on the other hand, I'm like, okay, it's limiting practice. Is it getting worse? Because we're in training camp right now. Like, he's not even playing real football action, and he's having to be held out of practice. Like, this is legitimately a concern. And then you add on top of the fact the quarterback disparity between the two. He's got a much better quarterback with Nico than Malik Neighbors does with, Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart, Jameis Winston. Like, I'm sure we'll see a combination of some throughout the season. It won't be Russ all year. So a lot of concerns just compound on top of each other on this one, and that's why I've got Malik behind Nico at this point. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here. Brian Thomas Jr. at 8 and Drake London at 9. Now, with Brian Thomas Jr., I've discussed it all offseason. I think people actually understand this one, that Travis Hunter will get targets. Now, the one thing that I always see when I talk about this is people saying, well, yeah, there's so many targets freed up, though. Like Christian Kirk is gone. Gabe Davis is gone. You have Evan Ingram gone. And I'm not here to say that Travis Hunter eats into Brian Thomas Jr.'s bottom line. Like, what his bottom line was last year, I think won't be touched. But the problem with Brian Thomas Jr. that I've always wanted to get across is that he won't take the leap in targets like a lot of people would have hoped that he would. Travis Hunter will be involved. I think he'll get 90-plus targets this year in fantasy. But the bottom line is Brian Thomas Jr. is still an elite player. We've seen him do it before. I just don't believe Trevor Lawrence is an elite quarterback to be able to supply 2 great fantasy options at wide receiver. So as much as I want to put Brian Thomas Jr. in that next tier above, I just can't with the Travis Hunter effect. Drake London at 9, I think is just going to be a really good player this year. Like, he's the only legitimate threat in the wide receiver core. Darnell Mooney, going to miss time to start the year with his shoulder. Kyle Pitts, we all know that story. Maybe it hits this year, maybe it doesn't. Drake London is the only one who really matters. Like, he's going to get 9-10 targets per game with a quarterback upgrade. Michael Penix is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins, which everybody understands at this point. But I think with a full offseason under his belt, it's going to be even better. So Drake London, I just can't find many faults, while his upside probably isn't still enormous. A.J. Brown at 10, Jackson Smith-Njigba at 11. Now, with A.J. Brown, this is actually interesting. I wanted to rank him lower. I just think there's too big of not a teardrop, but I think that A.J. Brown still, when he plays, will be better than JSN. But the problem with A.J. Brown that nobody's really talking about right now is that A.J. Brown is quietly dealing with a hamstring injury that's held him out of practice for like the past 2 weeks. Like, this is not, some injury that's gone away. Hamstring injuries typically kind of follow you throughout an entire season. So I'm a little worried about A.J. Brown, especially considering that he's not a spring chicken anymore. He's not old, but he's not a spring chicken. So with A.J. Brown, I know when he plays, he will give you that 30-plus point upside on any given week. I also know that he will give you only 5 points and a lot of disappearing acts throughout the whole season. So this injury is really going to dictate a lot of how I feel. But again, I still have him over JSN because JSN, while I do think is going to be really good, and I think for where you're drafting him at in all formats, he will be a bust-proof player. I think Jackson with the Jigba's ceiling is probably around this top 8 to top 10 range. And I think that JSN, while going to be targeted like crazy, does have a quarterback concern with Sam Darnold and is not exactly the greatest like downfield threat. But I think JSN is an elite wide receiver and an elite route runner. And if you look at Cooper Kupp and him, they're very similar player profiles, but he's just a better player at this point than Cooper Kupp. So while I am not concerned with him being the wide receiver 1, and I'm not concerned about him being a bust player in 2025, I just can't put him over A.J. Brown because I know he doesn't have that same level of upside. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got T. Higgins over Ladd McConkey. That is another change that I just recently made. Now, with T. Higgins, the reason I ended up doing this, it was a business decision because of Ladd McConkey with Keenan Allen. Now, I'm not particularly super concerned about Keenan Allen. I think the problem that I'm having with Ladd is that with Keenan Allen, like obviously he's got a tremendous amount of chemistry that's already been built up over years with Justin Herbert. Now, the other reason I'm not super concerned, though, is because he's obviously older. Like, he is not the same player he used to be. Now, granted, Keenan Allen will get a lot of, like, shorter targets, a lot of, like, your bail out your quarterback type plays. Like, if Justin Herbert's under pressure, he rolls out, like, Keenan Allen will be there to bail out his quarterback. But Ladd McConkey is still a better athlete, just a faster player at this point with a similar skill set. So I think Ladd McConkey won't be all of that affected. And I think he will still get in the end zone. But I do have to say, like, with this Keenan Allen signing, he's not the same player, but he does have that same chemistry, and he is good enough to take a little bit of a target share away. Marvin Harrison Jr. at 14 and Garrett Wilson at 15. Now, with Marvin, I have discussed all offseason, I'm not comfortable having Marvin as my wide receiver 1. If I am drafting Marvin, it's because I got him as my wide receiver 2, or even better, my wide receiver 3. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr., there's no question to me that he could be an enormous breakout. The way I always put this one, though, is that he's got such a broad range of outcomes. He's kind of like a Christian McCaffrey light in fantasy football this year, where I think Marvin could be, on one hand, a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. He might take the leap. It might be great. Arizona's offense might adjust to him a little bit. But on the other hand, I see him having a very similar finish to what he had in 2025, which was not good. And it would be a massive bust for where you're drafting him at. So this one is a very high risk, very high reward type of play right here. And I like to take risks. I'm just not on board with him as my wide receiver 1. Garrett Wilson, I had to move him up. I had to move him up for a couple reasons. Number one, Rashee Rice, who we will talk about in a little bit, had to move down for me. Now, Garrett Wilson, the other reason I had to move him up is because I think I was maybe underselling Garrett Wilson a little bit. I'm not big on drafting him still, but I do think that just the target share he will get will be so monstrous that in PPR leagues, it will not matter if he gets in the end zone 4 times or 8 times. I think he'll be a top 15, top 17 wide receiver. So because of Rashee Rice, I moved Garrett Wilson up. And we might as well get into Rashee Rice. Dropping down to the next tier. At 16, I've got Rashee. Now, if you missed the news last week, Rashee Rice is expected to meet with a suspension board about a potential suspension on like September 30th. So if you do a little math here, he should be available for the first 4 weeks of the Kansas City Chiefs season. Therefore, I believe Rashee Rice could be a top 10 wide receiver through the month of September. But after September 30th, all bets are off. Because this is a season interrupted, man. I mean, Rashee Rice, I've discussed for a while now. I think he'll be suspended for 4 games. But the problem I'm having with Rashee Rice at this point is I don't like when a season gets interrupted by something. And this is going to be a season interruption, mid-season. So let's say that he only gets suspended 4 games, but he comes back looking like really sluggish. Well, that's going to affect him for several more weeks. So Rashee Rice, I had no choice but to move him down. You know I love Rashee Rice if you're familiar with the channel. I just don't trust this whole situation playing out right now. Jalen Waddle at 17, though, he continues to rise for me. And I continue to receive flack day in and day out for not ranking Tyreek Hill in my top 30, but ranking Jalen Waddle inside my top 20. Cope with it. Jalen Waddle will be a better fantasy player this year than Tyreek Hill. I'm not wrong on this one. I'm out on Tyreek. I've discussed this all offseason about wide receiver cliffs and Tyreek Hill being right there. And he would be breaking history if he returned to be a top 12 wide receiver. He will not do it. Jalen Waddle is the better wide receiver option in Miami. Tyreek Hill's offseason has been really noisy. Tua doesn't even really trust him right now. All the while, Jalen Waddle quietly has had a really good offseason. Been reported by Miami all offseason. So with Jalen Waddle, he's one of my most drafted players on Underdog. I'm going to continue to draft this guy because I just believe in him so much this year. Mike Evans at 18, Terry McLaurin at 19. Now, the thing with Mike that I've always said is this Egbuka pick really concerned me. Emeka Egbuka going to Tampa Bay, I think was more than just, we think this player's going to be great. I think that when you look at this situation, Mike Evans being at the age where father time can take him right away. Chris Godwin being in an injury predicament with this ankle and requiring more surgeries is not comforting. What if it's both, though? What if both Mike and Chris Godwin aren't great, and that's the reason they had to go wide receiver 1 in round 1? Emeka Egbuka is going to play right away. He will be a factor, and Mike Evans does concern me. All having said that, if Mike Evans hits this year, he's way too low in the rankings. Mike Evans will be a top 10, top 12 guy if he hits. If he plays the same way he's always played, he'll get you 10 touchdowns and over 1,100 yards receiving. So take your pick. Do you believe in him, or are you a little concerned? Because my concern is the reason he's at 18. But I had to put him over Terry because this situation is not good. Like this contract situation, by the time you're watching this, maybe they've signed him. I've seen some movement at the potential of them getting him signed. But at the same time, man, the problem I've always said is that I'm not concerned about him missing time because he needs to learn the offense. The guy's going to be 30 this year. He knows the freaking offense. He was elite for them last year. The problem I have with players that are getting up to his age category, when they miss time in camp, that means that you're way more susceptible to sustain a groin pull, a hamstring pull, right away during the season, and then you won't be that same player throughout the rest of the season because it will linger. That's happened a lot in history. These are guys that just are older, and they need to get their bodies ready and play real football to get into football shape. Terry's not doing that right now. So that's why I put Mike over Terry at 19. And I also think you just factor in the negative touchdown regression that will come. And it will come, by the way, for Terry McLaurin. Now at 20 to round us out in this tier, it's Davante Adams. And again, I'm concerned with him. I have not moved him yet, but I might pretty soon. Again, this fits into the same Puka argument with Matt Stafford is very concerning right now. Like, I'm very concerned about this Matt Stafford injury. And Davante Adams, if he has to play with Jimmy Garoppolo, it'll be a second time. Because if you don't remember, he had to get out of the Raiders because of Jimmy Garoppolo. He was begging to get traded so he could go to a different team and get away from Jimmy G. It will be disastrous if it's Jimmy G, but if it's Matt Stafford, he will be really good, particularly in the red zone. So Davante, I still like him in this range, but I'm telling you, I'm getting less and less hot about Davante and way more cold on him. Drop it down to our next tier. Xavier Worthy at 21, Zay Flowers at 22. Now, with Xavier Worthy, he's a part of this whole Rashee Rice domino effect, right? Rashee Rice, we're just waiting to know what the permanent suspension will be and how many games he will be suspended. We don't know that yet. Originally, I was saying I think Rashee Rice will get suspended immediately, and therefore I think Xavier Worthy could be a top 10 wide receiver in the month of September. Well, if Rashee Rice plays all 4 games in September, Worthy is probably a top 25, top 30 guy. But when Rashee Rice is gone, that's when Worthy has top 10 upside. So he's got to stay in this range for me because even with Rashee Rice there, I think he will be involved enough to where he's still a top 25, top 30 wide receiver in fantasy, but I don't see him taking like a huge leap, if that makes sense. Like as long as Rashee Rice is there, he will be the number 1 guy. It's just a question of how long the guy gets suspended, and we are still in limbo as we speak. Zay Flowers at 22. I know I'm above consensus on this guy. I've discussed it all offseason. I really like Zay in 2025. I've done a lot of research on breakout wide receivers, and he's fit really well, particularly with contract year wide receivers. Now, Zay Flowers is not an ideal contract season player because he does have the potential to get his 5th-year option picked up by Baltimore. But let's say that they pay him early. Well, this could be a season that he goes to when he sits down at the negotiating table next year and says, look what I just did for you. I think Zay Flowers is going to be really involved, and that's not just me. Todd Monken, all offseason, their offensive coordinator, has discussed about, yes, I need to get him the ball more. He needs to be more involved. He's an electric player for us. Zay Flowers is a good player. It's just a matter of involvement, and if they're committed to getting him more involved this year, I'm going to rank him above consensus here at 22. Ted McMillan at 23, Cortland Sutton at 24. Ted McMillan did rise for me. I did like what I saw from him in the preseason with Bryce Young so far. And with Ted McMillan, I just think that there's still a limitation here with this ceiling. Like, I think Bryce Young will be fine in terms of the NFL, but he's not going to be some quarterback all of a sudden that provides this great fantasy upside for his pass catchers. I think Ted McMillan will be the wide receiver one. But I also think that Ted McMillan's ceiling will be capped. So maybe I was wrong on the player Ted McMillan was. I was not a big fan of the prospect. Maybe I was wrong about that. But that doesn't change Bryce Young and his limitations as far as giving his wide receivers top fantasy upside. Cortland Sutton at 24. I think with Cortland Sutton, he's going to be better than this in all likelihood. I don't know why I have him this low ranked, when in reality, I think I should probably rank him around 20. Right around that Devontae Adams spot, I think Sutton is probably going to finish there. Because legitimately, like, they just signed the guy. Bo Nix will take a leap. This offense looks so good this year. And realistically, like, he's their best wide receiver still. Like, they want Pat Bryant, their rookie, to be good. But Cortland Sutton's proved it. Marvin Mims is not a threat. Cortland Sutton's going to continue to get 8-9 targets per game in this Denver offense. So I just think that he'll be really good still. I think the only concern I really have is that he's a little bit older, but Cortland Sutton, especially in the red zone, is going to be a legitimate threat. Now, dropping down to our next tier, Travis Hunter at 25 and Deebo Samuel at 26. Travis Hunter, I've been discussing all offseason. It's just finally okay to say it again. He's going to get freaking targets. For a while there, we went through this weird period where people were like, no, he's going to be a cornerback, bro. He's a corner. They're talking about him as a cornerback. Guys, you don't trade up from the 5th spot in the draft to the 2nd spot to draft a cornerback. It just doesn't happen in the history of the NFL. When push comes to shove, Travis Hunter will be a wide receiver for this team. He will get, in all likelihood, 90-plus targets. Now, where I think he separates is I think he will have elite type of games. But I also think he'll disappear a bunch. I think that's what we'll see from Travis Hunter because they will play him at corner in certain spots. But I think Travis Hunter will give you games where he goes off for like 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's where he gets a top 25 ranking for me. And Deebo Samuel, this is one of my most drafted players I've been on all offseason. I've got no metrics to back this up. Like, this is not a metric-backed ranking right here whatsoever. Deebo Samuel is just a player I personally believe in. On a contract year, wants more money, with a different offense, fresh start. Again, the offense he's on is also with a creative offensive mind, running the plays, designing the plays with Cliff Kingsbury. This will be very similar to how he was used in San Francisco. He will not try to use him, Cliff Kingsbury, in ways that he should not be using him. He will give him the ball out of the backfield. He will give him shorter routes, let him work in space. Deebo Samuel, I just believe in this year. I think that he's a very big risk, but considering where you're drafting him, I'm really not that concerned with the draft price. If I hit on him, I know I get a top 10, top 12 guy. But if I miss on him, no big deal because you're drafting him in the mid to later rounds in certain types of formats. DJ Moore at 27, Devonta Smith at 28. Now with DJ Moore, he's been here basically all offseason. I just can't get on top of this Chicago Bears offense. Like, I am kind of out on Caleb Williams at this point. And I'm sorry to Bears fans. Like, I think he's a great talent. I just think he's a little bit of a cowboy. Like, his playing style is not going to fit Ben Johnson's system, I don't think. Ben Johnson's system is all about timing. Jared Goff, find that receiver, go through your progressions, and hit him on time. Caleb Williams holds the ball forever. I'm not sure his processing speed is great. And DJ Moore is in an ultimately kind of bad situation if you think about it because of the weapons they've added to this offense. And also, when you look at Caleb Williams throughout his career, dating back to college, he doesn't have dominant wide receiver ones. He likes to spread the ball out to the open guy because he likes to go, run out of the pocket, improvise, and find the open guy. DJ Moore just at a disadvantage this year. Devonta Smith at 28. Listen, I've had him ranked outside the top 30 all offseason. I'm coming more and more around to him because I realized that if I was going to say Jalen Hurts is going to throw the ball more this year, which I truly believe he will, then I can't, on the other hand, say Devonta Smith won't be good then. Devonta Smith, I've been drafting more, and I wish I had drafted him more early in the offseason, because I've been saying all offseason that Jalen Hurts will throw the ball more. Well, Devonta Smith, especially if A.J. Brown is affected by injury, he's going to play a big role. The problem I just always have with Devonta is since he's the wide receiver 2 in the offense, he will disappear for you. But he will also provide you big games. He's sort of A.J. Brown. So this is a ranking that I had to change. I knew it could not, in good conscience, not rank Devonta Smith inside the top 30 with my Jalen Hurts projection this year. Now, dropping down to our last tier, our last two guys, Khalil Shakir, DK Metcalf. From my last rankings, these do not change. I know I'm way above consensus on Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir is going to be good. Like, this is an offense with Josh Allen that threw the ball way less than they usually do last year. And he was their best guy. So let's say that this year there's another 70 targets added on top of the workload. Well, that's 70 more targets that Khalil Shakir probably won't get all of them, but he will be their number one guy. They're banking on a Keon Coleman breakout. They're banking on a Dalton Kincaid breakout. But we don't know if those guys are going to hit. What we know is that Khalil Shakir is that number one guy. He's paid. They didn't add more weapons. And this is a guy who actually proved it last year on 100-plus targets. I think he's going to be pretty good this year. DK Metcalf just in an offense where he'll dominate the target share, but at the same time, he'll get double covered a lot, triple covered a lot, and he will be in situations where he disappears. He's a little bit of an upgrade over George Pickens for fantasy football purposes in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Not excited. Can't say that he's a bad fantasy player, but I do think that when you look at his cost on redraft leagues particularly, not a player I'm targeting. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the top 12 kicker rankings for 2025 fantasy football, click on this video right here.